Stanford University swimmer Brock Turner walked out of the Santa Clara County Jail
after serving half of a 6-month sentence for the sexual assault of an unconscious woman.
About a dozen people held signs and at least 2 openly displayed assault rifles. Someone scribbled chalk warnings on the sidewalk telling him to stay away from their daughters.
The 21-year-old is now required to register as a sex offender every 3 months for the rest of his life.
And Brock Turner had served 3 months for having sexually assaulted an unconscious woman behind a dumpster. He returned home to Ohio, where armed protesters lined the street outside his parents' home. I'm back with Annalise, Sarah, Mike, and Pat. Now, Pat, you were actually there when Brock was released. Can you describe the scene to us?
Oh, I sure can. 3:30 in the morning. I was blurry-eyed after 2 hours of sleep. But I have to tell you, there were probably about 40 cameras there. I will tell you the Santa Clara County Jail, completely professional in a couple of ways. One, they didn't feel that they needed to hide him. They weren't giving him any special treatment whatsoever. At the same time, they kept us, if you can imagine, the stairs coming down from the door. We had to stay on both sides. I was at the bottom, and I was about 5 feet from him as he tried to get into a car that was waiting for him, not with his parents, by the way. I can get to that later. And I tried to break through some...
We see you. We're watching you try to break through there. We're actually watching the footage. Now, what's the point about not being with the parents?
Well, because what happened was he got into a car. There was one driver that we know of in this white SUV. What happened was the parents were waiting elsewhere at a hotel, probably, I don't know that area that well, I'm going to guess it was about 10 miles away. And a local crew had gotten tipped off that the parents were going to be there, and you probably saw footage of them waiting for him there, and then they snuck out for his flight back to Ohio. I tried to get through. The deputies were very nice, though, but they strong-armed me. They wouldn't let me through, but they were nice guys.
We saw you. We saw what you did. It was
throwing elbows, pointy elbows.
Now you actually got into his cell. Is that right? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I asked the Santa Clara County Jail if they would allow us to see it because, you know, I was curious for a kid, who's lived a decent life from a decent family. What was it like for him? There is footage. I don't know. I don't have a monitor, so I don't know if you've seen it.
We're looking at the footage from the cell.
Yeah, he shared that cell with 4 other protective custody inmates. And they were cramped in there, I have to tell you. And as far as Sheriff Lori Smith, I believe her name is, of course, Lori Smith, wonderful woman. She was explaining to me that, there was no special treatment for him. He was right there with those 4 other protective custody inmates whom I saw through a glass because they had to move them to let us see his cell. And, I'm dying to know what that was like for him being, I'm not saying they're lesser people. I'm just saying it's a different world for him. She said that as far as she knows, there were no problems for him. He did receive so much hate mail, you probably already know this, that he asked them to stop giving it to him.
Wow. Well, that's like watching social media. Speaking of the hatred, there were protesters outside his parents' home in Ohio that read, amongst other things, castrate rapist, shoot your local rapist. Some of these people had assault rifles. Mike, what do you think is motivating all this tremendous hatred?
Yeah, obviously you can understand it. I also think it's a horrendous act, but I just don't think it's well placed. So, in research, that sex offender registry doesn't really work.
Okay.
And it's interesting. What I believe is somebody who has treated both survivors and perpetrators. I think if anything is going to get to this guy, it's going to be treatment. And he is subjected to something that does work, which is court-ordered polygraph tests in conjunction with psychotherapy. Now that works, and I think that is a brilliant idea. I'm so glad that's what
they're doing with him.
Yes,
we know that. Oh,
and I think that is more effective than this registry. And clearly, the fear. And if he is going to admit anything, as you know, with all the patients you've treated, having assault rifles in your lawn is only going to make him more defensive right now.
Right.
But that's part of the registration requirement is that he has to register, which is a lifetime requirement, and he has to go through treatment and also on his birthday, every time he moves, he can't be anywhere near a school, playground, mall, anywhere that the children frequent. And I think people minimize that, is that this is a life sentence, even though he did 6 months, on which he did 3 months in jail, actually. This is for the rest of his life. And I feel that now with these death threats and armed protesters outside the house, for a guy who's really done everything the court has ordered him to do, and a father who there's outrage over the father as well in his response to the act, calling it a 20 minutes of action or whatever it was. I think now these people are in danger, and you're not talking about sex registration in a run-of-the-mill case. You're talking about sex registration, a very high-profile case that has caused national outrage.
Hang on a second. I'll let Annalise respond because I know you're having energy on this. But let's look at what some of the protesters outside the parents' home wanted to say to the perpetrator. Take a look.
He's not going to live some happy, pleasant life. We're going to never let him forget what he did.
If he is uncomfortable, then he begins to receive at least some punishment that he deserves for his crime.
There are people willing to defend a potential victim in case he were to decide to do this again, since he knows he can get away with it. If the justice system failed him, then the community will not. We know what he did, and we're not going to forget.
Whatever you're going to say, you still feel that way?
I do still feel that way. Sarah is talking about the fact that this is a lifetime registration.
Yep.
Please don't forget that the victim of this crime is also going to be dealing with ramifications for a lifetime. And I would argue what she has to endure on a go-forward basis is far worse than having some protesters outside of your house. And let's be honest, they're not going to never let him forget. They're going to eventually, the media is going to go away, and they're going to go away.
These people are taking the law in their own hands with machine guns standing outside these people's home. That is not a joke.
It's an open carry state.
It doesn't matter
what they're doing.
Do you want people outside? Doesn't matter. Do you want people armed outside your home, threatening to kill you, castrate your husband?
Let me tell you, Greene County is 5-10 minutes south of Dayton, where I grew up. So they are, in the neighborhood, in my neighborhood, and that's their First Amendment right. That's their Second Amendment right. They are constantly protecting what they're doing. And to the extent that they start actually harassing him, to the extent that there's actual violence, then yes, people are going to step in. But I don't feel bad for this guy. Don't rape people, and this wouldn't have happened. I don't feel bad for him to remove it out of
Wait, Pat's out there. Pat, go ahead. Pat.
Yeah, I love it. I can't wait for people to start screaming at me about this, but can we look at this in one other aspect of that? He didn't ask for such a minor sentence. He didn't ask for that. What is he supposed to say to the judge? No, man, give me 10 years.
Yeah,
Come on.
exactly.
And marched out. Wait, why aren't people sitting outside of Judge Persky's courtroom screaming for his head? I don't feel sorry for this kid either, but I think the anger seems to be misguided. He didn't ask for such a light sentence.
And what's the plan? What's the plan? Every time a legal process doesn't give you the result you want, you show up in the street with machine guns?
Outside the person's house?
That's the world we live in?
Yeah, and there is no constitutional right for threatening somebody.
I gotta go to break. We'll keep this going. I got a lot more to say here. Later up, Colin Kaepernick's jersey has suddenly become the #1 bestseller in the NFL. Is his protest of the national anthem responsible for that uptick? Back after this.
The CNN.
One day I was at work, scrolling through the news on my phone, and I came across an article. In it, I read and learned for the first time about how I was found unconscious with my hair disheveled, long necklace wrapped around my neck, bra pulled out of my dress pulled off over my shoulders and pulled up above my waist, that I was butt naked all the way down to my boots, legs spread apart, and had been penetrated by a foreign object by someone I did not recognize.
That was part of a letter from Brock Turner's victim describing the night she had been raped behind a dumpster. He is out of jail after serving 3 months. He'll have to register as a sex offender for life. I'm back with Annalise, Sarah, Mike, and Pat. And joining us, Derek Logue, he himself a convicted sex offender, founder of OnceFallen.com. So Derek, does he deserve to be treated the way he's being treated by his community, do you feel?
Well, I know one thing. If there was a bunch of protesters ever coming outside my door, I would have expected the police to arrest them, especially when these protesters were out there with assault weapons and making references to rape and murder. There's something inherently wrong with individuals who think it's okay to do the same thing like this person you're showing right now. That's a rape joke. I'm surprised some of you people aren't really going after them about that. It's a very threatening thing. I've been a victim of, online vigilantes at the least. Many times over the years, I've had death threats and I've had people tell me they're going to come to my house and cut my head off and sodomize me. So I've dealt with a lot of this stuff myself. These people should all be in jail right now themselves.
Derek, do you think his sentence was too light? Is that maybe why there's such a reaction?
Look, the sex, what people are downplaying the difficulties of being a registered sex offender. Yeah. I use the term registered citizen. I've been registering here in Ohio for 13 years. I would not wish this on my worst enemy. Every aspect of my life is dictated to me. Where I live, where I work. Hell, I haven't worked in 10 years. Who I date, all these things, 30, 40 years down the line, I'm still going to have to be dealing with the consequences of what I've done.
Hang a second, Derek. Mike, I'm sort of flabbergasted by what's happening to us. Forget what this kid did and what his punishment was. The fact that we are no longer allowing the legal system to function or to determine what someone's punishment would be. We're all of a sudden getting into the streets with pitchforks and torches. What's going on with us, the public?
Yeah, I think psychologically there's all this anger, right? And there's this mob mentality, and we are trying to take the law into our own hands. But underneath that anger, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of, yes, there's injustice here. Do I think he should have been in jail for a longer amount of time? Yes, I do. I think 3 months is way too short. I think what he did is horrific.
Okay, what's the difference between you, who has that feeling and is unhappy with it, and someone who picks up the torch and the pitchfork and walks out in the street? That's a different thing.
It absolutely is, and I think we have to figure out where we're going to direct that anger.
Pat, go ahead.
I think this is important. I think a lot of times the internet has fueled this mentality now. As a journalist, when I read blogs about things that happen in court, and I was in court, and they are so incorrect, and yet these are people passing themselves as journalists, and they fan flames and fuel sentiment, I think that drives a lot of this, that we won't let the system do its job. Everybody's individual judge and jury now, and they're going to take action. And I do think the internet and social media have a lot to do with this.
Sarah, you had something?
Yeah, and I just want to add, I agree with Pat, and I also want to add that we need to remember that Brock is appealing his sentence, and really he's appealing the sex registration part of his sentence because the sentence was only 6 months. And I think the protesting outside of his house, the danger that he's exposed to, and his family who are innocent are exposed to, is going to bolster his attorney's arguments to modify his sentence. I think that's going to help.
Annalise likes that he's a sex offender.
No,
you think it's the proper thing?
I don't like it. I don't like that any of this happened.
I think it's proper.
I think it's proper that he's a registered sex offender, and I think that there's not only is it a piece of the punishment, there's a shame aspect to it. I'm not quite sure how much it actually protects us as a society, as you were saying, but I think that it's an added sort of shame element. What I don't like about what's going on with the protesters right now is it, as Sarah hit on, is creating sympathy for him, and I don't want any sympathy for this guy. And so that's my one problem that I have with these guys, with the protesters lined up, is now he's the victim and he's not, and they're allowing him.
Well, I think the danger far outweighs the sympathy here.
Mike, I think it's a false sense of security. When we look at studies, we as public people, we think it creates a sense of safety, but research shows that it does not. I believe in sex registration, and I think we need to change the laws in this country to make it specific. If somebody is a pedophile, then they should stay away from any place where there are young children. So I think the point is
that's the problem with sex registration is that it's a blanket. It's a blanket.
What Mike is saying, pedophiles who have as their sexual orientation children cannot be treated and need to be dealt with.
Right.
People that have inappropriate sexual contacts or sex offenders need to be treated.
Yes.
Right. They can change.
Dr. Drew?
But Pat, I got to tell you, I'm very sympathetic what you're saying about the mob and the ink that spilled, the inaccurate. It's unbelievable. Whenever I'm the object of stories, I'm shocked at how far from the truth they are. It's insanity.
It's so out of control. It's no wonder a lot of people don't talk to media anymore. But can I just say one quick thing? I am absolutely baffled. Who the heck is advising this family? All he has to do is pick one great media entity, sit down and say, I'm a dope. I have learned so much. I want to do things that will change. How come he doesn't understand I'm sorry? And that humiliation will bite a lot for him. And if he shows some, people just might back off. Nobody is advising this family, or they're not listening. Don't you think?
Clearly they're not not advising them properly, because remember, the father read a statement where he called the rape 20 minutes of action. It's horrible. What lawyer would allow them to do that?
Guys,
Maybe they just don't get it. Yeah.
Well, or maybe there's something about their strategy in the courtroom that they're putting as a priority, and the public opinion doesn't. They're not paying attention. I don't know.
Right.
I agree with you, though, Pat. Next up, a new twist in the Colin Kaepernick national anthem controversy.